let's please give Senate President Ty Masterson a warm Pachyderm welcome.
Appreciate that. And by the way, so this is, I know the one thing about the Pachyderm is you're an informed crowd. So I just thought I'm going to give a few kind of updates on some things, campaign or policy, and then I'd like to open for questions predominantly because I'd much rather speak about what you guys want to talk about than what I may or may not find to be important to myself. I'm actually excited for this election, honestly. I mean, as the leader of the Senate, we have, I think, the highest quality crop of candidates that I've seen in my time up there, honestly. And so we have been able to shift. And then there's been kind of some little mini miracles along the way. I mean, that includes, so the primary that happened in August, I had several members of my body just not run again that have kind of historically caused some grief, if you will, been my character builders in Topeka. And they just up and retired, some of them. So we were able to get some really high quality, like House members coming over, and then some really high quality interest in a couple of our really tough districts. And so I'm super excited about it because when you got the quality of the candidate does matter, right? I mean, it's especially in tough districts, and then the funding behind that, and we've been very successful in our fundraising to support those candidates. But it's one of those years where, look at the presidential election is obviously going to color us all the way down, right? And from my perspective, I can't understand why anybody would vote for the other side, but I know there's people on the other side can't understand why they'd vote for us, and it's not a good place to be. But so I would say and then you got something like, for those of you, Mike Peterson, here's Senator Mike Peterson, Wichita, who every cycle has to work his rear end off to win by a point or two, right? The district's just difficult. Got no opponent. None, primary or general. I mean, it's like almost a miracle. When I saw that, I was like, we're calling the Secretary of State going, okay, what did you miss? I mean, we didn't think, no, there's nobody there. But that allowed us to move 6 figures worth of election dollars to the Northeast, where the battleground is, because we would have supported him in a strong way, and we didn't have to. So those kind of things that really allowed us to shift some resources, and then we have such, and I'm speaking wholly on the Senate side because that's what I'm so familiar with, but I feel Dan's in the same spot. We have such a good candidate in Riley County, we're Manhattan, that we're actually out there playing offense. Current Democrat member there. And we're also playing offense in Leavenworth. We have that. We lost that 4 years ago. Some of that was just candidate quality. Others was just the timing, right? There was a pretty tough Trump movement back then. Although that's why we're after it. That district even slightly went for Trump 4 years ago. And now we've got a much better position. So we're going offense on those two. And then I don't think there's any surprise to anybody that knows the big defense for us is in Johnson County, where we have to outperform Trump on a ballot by 10 or 12 points to keep our people in there. And we have some amazing candidates up there. The one I point to the most is Mike Thompson, who they're always after him. But I tell you what, that guy is probably the hardest working candidate. He personally, I think told me he's been on 16,000 doors. He started back in session. I mean, he's been walking and knocking, because he's not just knocking registered Republicans. You try to make yourself more efficient and try to likely voters and try to knock on the productive. He's knocking on registered voter doors. So Democrats, Independents, Republicans, he's got signs in Democrat yards. And so they're spending a ton of money to take him out. Because Trump did win his district, I think it was 11 last cycle. So and they anticipate something similar. But he really has a way about himself. So I'm super excited about what we can do, because what brings me to that is there's a lot of outside money, national money, Democrat money nationally, that has flooded into our state for the sole purpose of trying to break our supermajority. All right, and what always is funny to me about that, we've never had a functional supermajority my time up there, right? I mean, and we might actually be on the cusp of that this time if we can hold our own. And you saw that in the last session. I think she vetoed 40 some provisions this last time, and she just vetoes us like crazy. But we were only able to override about 11, which is a good number given the crew we had, right? And some of them we just had to beat her on the field. But we had, 3 Republicans that were consistently voting with lower, like taxes, for example, right? We tax plan, veto, tax plan, veto, tax plan, veto. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. We were down tax plan number 6, right? Rolled out the last day of session with tax cuts. She still vetoes it. And that last bill only had 11 people in the entire legislature vote against it. And she still vetoed it. But we couldn't override it because of those 3 members in my party in my chamber. Right, so not until, inside baseball, not until we went out and got vetoed, not until one of those 3 members finally came over with us and just asked for one thing, and we did it. And so once that happened, then all of a sudden she's in and she'll sign it, right? And then it was all her idea to begin with. Right, so you'll see she'll take credit for all those tax cuts that were repeatedly the Republicans, but she has the benefit of the media. Nothing frustrates me more than that. Is that you go and you watch even the local affiliates, right? It's not just Fox or MSNBC or whatever, right? Those are the national things. You go watch your local news. It's frustrating to me that we're always on the downside of that. But I think with all the social media and alternate forms of information, people are just becoming more wise about they're seeing things they wouldn't see if you just stick to those mainstreams. And so I'd say cautiously, but I'm still optimistic, certainly for Kansas. And if we have a functional supermajority, then it's like, whoa, what do I do? I actually caught the car. What can we actually get done? We've been playing defense, even though it looks good on paper. We've really been playing defense all these years, right? Trying to get as much as we can around her, where we can generally win against her with our current supermajorities, the social issues, right? Because we can get those extra 2 or 3, protecting women's sports, trying to get support down to the border, the Born Alive bill, right? That you think is like, I can't believe somebody vetoed something that allows you to save somebody that's already born alive. But anyway, those are the issues where we have been able to functionally override. But you get to parental choice in education, right? You get to really anything out. Even the budget's hard to get. You can't get any overrides on it. But those issues are really hard to get to. So with that, that's kind of an update on the Senate. I am very happy. We have the tax cuts are rolling through. We hope that looks good. Praying for our guys nationally. Thank God for Ron Estes and the guys, our friends up there that are fighting that battle. People tell me they don't know how I do what I do with this group. I don't know how they do what they do up there. That just seems so futile to me at that level. But thank God he's there. So with that, I hope this isn't too soon to do it. I'd like to open for questions.
Sounds good. Are you ready for this crowd?
Well, so I got for those that chat, I've got to kind of Bob Dole this thing because I've torn this shoulder up. So we're a lefty today.
Okay. Sounds good. We're going to ask questions today. We have a lot of time, so I have a lot of questions. If would be good for us to start with the guy right up front. But you need to raise your hands up if you're members, and we can ask them questions first. So we'll start right here.
A couple questions. Are taxpayers on the hook for this train service from Oklahoma City to Wichita? And are taxpayers on the hook if we Chiefs move into Kansas City, Kansas, and the star bonds fail? Are we on the hook for that?
No, it's a good question, and there's a lot of misconception about that as well. Now, the flyer, we didn't do anything taxpayer-wise on the rail. There's nothing in legislation. Now, star bonds, which is the program that would bring the Chiefs over, if you will, the answer is no. Taxpayers are not on the line, and that's been proven. Now, that program has been abused, and I'm working to try to bring some legislation to pare it back, but only in the sense that it's the closest you can get in a government program to actually kind of the user fee, if you will. It takes the tax revenues, sales tax revenues that are currently coming into this district, this benefit district, and sets the baseline of what's being collected. So anything new, new sales tax, new activity is what then can go to pay the bonds. And even if the bonds go, the bond payers, really it's the bondholders that are at risk. And you've seen that. There was one major project, not major project, it was how it got abused, for kind of local development in Johnson County, where that did go down. There was nothing, taxpayers not on the hook, so it's been demonstrated, and they just had to renegotiate their bonds with the bondholders, and they've continued on. It really wasn't meant for that, right? It had become for these like localized developments where you're kind of pitting one like Academy Sports against Dick Sports for these different groups. It was never meant for that, and it's been abused. We're going to try to do something to curtail that. It was meant for the projects like the Chiefs or like the Kansas Speedway, and all those projects have paid off by those user fees early. That's one of the few things, because I'm not a huge subsidy guy. I don't like government subsidy in business, but if you're going to do anything, and there was a lot of momentum for that, that's the way to do it. So you don't. I told them when they came to me with that bill, I said two things: no taxpayer liability in any capacity. Don't raise any tax or fee that would divert money to it. And both those things are true. That's a good question.
Okay, Dr. Reedy?
So I've got two questions. One question is about taxes on Social Security benefits. There are some states there is no tax for Social Security benefit, but in the state of Kansas, we pay I think approximately 6% tax for Social Security benefit. Can you introduce a bill in the Senate saying that there is no tax for Social Security benefit?
Well, you're in luck. The tax plan that we finally got passed and signed eliminates Kansas tax on Social Security completely. It doesn't remove a tax; it takes it all the way off. So your next cycle, you won't have any tax on Social Security.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question about property tax. Retired members, people, couple, they still have to pay property tax. If they make less than $100,000, can you introduce a bill saying that there is no tax if you make less than $100,000?
So I'll be candidly probably not on that, right? Because two things. Property tax is predominantly local. I say predominantly. The only property tax the state levies is the 20 mills for K-12 education. There is $1.5 million for institutional buildings, but that's it. And we need to change the structure of how property. Like we introduced and passed on the Senate side a constitutional amendment that limited the growth. Like you can't the appraisal of your house, because that's how it games, right? My house I live in for 20 years now on paper is worth more than double, right? 2.5 times, so I'm paying 2.5 times the property tax plus the mill levy increases. So that's how you get the gain. But it would limit, particularly for people that stay in their homes. What we passed in a constitutional amendment said there couldn't be more than a 4% value increase on your home in any year, because you're seeing 20 and plus percent, and so there is room for value to go up, but you're not going to see this 20-30% gains over time. The problem you have with saying this group of people's not going to pay property tax is it loads up everybody else that's not in that group. And so you're benefiting that group, pick an age or a demographic. If you take property tax off of them, or it's because as a Republican, you want the broadest base and the lowest rates, right? I mean, that's what you're looking for. And so to cut some group out, and what I've seen happen up there, and this has happened to Kansas in particular on sales tax, you'll get a group come in and say, well, we need to be exempt, so you exempt them. Well, then the next group comes in, and the next group comes in, and the next group comes in, and you start exempting all these different groups. Well, then the rates go up. So Kansas's real issue is honestly spending. We per capita spend more than a lot most of the states around us. That's what drives it. And so we have to get that. And I'm not sure where we're going to go with this now, because with Laura, well, let me back up. So with all this stimulus money that's come in, right? So you have, in her time here, we have ballooned just the operational cost of our state 60%. Just the operational cost of the administrative side of our state. And because she has filled every FTE, because that's her job program. If you work for government, it's good for employment. So she has filled all those. We've allowed for some raises, and some of that was necessary, but we have ballooned that. And now all this stimulus money that has come in to the state, it's going to start fading away, right? I mean, she talks about it, kills me when she gets up and she goes, well, I've fully funded schools and I've balanced the budget and I've done this program, I've funded that program. Because she was handed a ton of money. Right, she was not I'd like to take credit for that as because the legislature's the budgeters, right? I mean, they proposed the budget, the legislature, okay. Well, the same's true. Then the legislature's done all that, But that's not true either. The truth is, her first budget, she proposed refinancing teacher retirement to spend. And then 2 years later, we have COVID, and she gets handed billions of dollars. Some of that straight to the administration, half of it almost. Right? So it's like, I try to tell people, it's like this. If you're used to living on $75,000 a year, and this year, next 2 years, somebody gives you an extra 75. Now, it's not hard to balance your budget. And that's what we've done. Matter of fact, we've now gotten used to living closer to 100, 125. Well, when I go back to 75, now I'm in trouble. All right, so we have to control the spending side of things, and Kansas has to get that under control. I'm excited for another thing that we're going to try to do. Dan, the speaker, it's the first one in he's really been with me on getting us constrained back into our 90-day calendar sessions. We're moving that direction. Constraining us. We're going to try to pass bills that limit the total amount of spending, just so you have to talk about priorities, not about how much more goes in, and the legislature getting back in control of the budget. It's just been, historically, governor proposes the budget. We sit on pins and needles till she does her state of the state, drops a 1,000-page bill on us, and then we got to try to digest it in 6 weeks, right, and try to say what's in, what's out. We're not doing that anymore. The legislature's going to take the budget back over and have a legislative budget. And she can still propose one, but it'll just be, this is her opinion of what we need to do, and you'll be able to determine the difference and decide on those. But the legislature needs to take that back over, that process. They will do. So sorry, I got way afield of that question, but it reminded me of a few things. Yes, sir.
Yes, Tony, on two points, two questions. On convention of states, where are we on that in terms of prospects the road ahead? And also on the value of both. I participated in that a few years back, and it was left a very bad taste in my mouth. And what's the future on that look like?
So both good questions. I'd say good news on one, bad on the other. But so convention of states, right? Honestly, I guess we're in the courts with both of them. What we did is we passed convention of states last year again, what Senate did, but it didn't come to the supermajority, right? And so we are being sued. In effect, to some degree, I'm suing myself, right? I'm suing myself as a member that voted for the convention of the states against a presiding officer that determined it not passed because of our Kansas Constitution, which was also me. So we're in the courts to determine that. I'm very optimistic that once that goes to our U.S. Supreme Court, that they will opine that our Kansas Constitution doesn't apply to the U.S. Article 5. That's the result we're hoping for. And then that just says, because it just doesn't apply, right? Because the Kansas Constitution can't override the U.S. Constitution on that provision. So that's where I think that's headed. And I think we'll get a good result, and then we'll be able to pass it. Because we'll get easily simple majorities. I'm not so concerned. I think we might be able to actually get super majorities if this election cycle goes as well as I hope. We might even be able to do it against that. But so that's that front. Value them both. The whole purpose we were needing value them both, right, is because of that nasty Hodes decision in our Kansas Supreme Court, right, that decided there's under strict scrutiny a constitutional right to abortion, right, which I'm a non-lawyer, so they had to explain that to me too, but strict scrutiny under that, anything perceived to be in Kansas law to restrict abortion in any fashion is presumptively unconstitutional. That's what that court case says. I mean, it's sick, but it's what it says. And so right now they're enjoining us on so many fronts, right? They've enjoined us on a woman's right to know, right, as unconstitutional. And they just had their opinion come out of the Supreme Court reaffirming Hodes, reaffirming it under strict scrutiny. So we're in a lot of trouble in Kansas unless we can change our Supreme Court, get an opinion that goes the other way. We're in trouble. I mean, it's a difficult thing to do because we could go past. The one thing you don't want to do, and this is really hard. I had to explain this to Students for Life. Great group of kids, right? And they're wanting us to pass an abortion ban, right? I mean, but we go do something like that now in this environment, and then they enjoin that as unconstitutional. It in one fell swoop wipes out all the restrictions we currently have that are being fought. We just wipe them all out. But it's counterintuitive to think that if you go do something like that, it takes you the wrong direction. But that is, from a legal perspective, that is what would happen. So we are still working hard around the edges. You know, that's what Born Alive was, right? We trying to take a hold of that. That's what we're trying to invest in, you know, supporting mothers and children and demonstrate that Republicans do care, right? It's a difficult thing because, particularly for me, my personal stance, right? I don't think there's a good reason to have abortion, right? I mean, my own daughter had an unwanted pregnancy, and that little girl has turned out to be a blessing from God to me and my whole family. And so it became more pro-life than ever before. But I also know, you know, the exceptions, you know, life of the mother, rape, incest. We'll probably have to embrace those and other to make sure that we have a stance that meets the middle, right? Really, the most radical stance on abortion right now is the current Democrat stance that just kill them till they breathe, right? I mean, that's currently the model that they're pushing. And that has fewer people that support it than even those that don't want abortion at all. And the bulk of people are in the middle, understanding with exceptions, right? And I've brought myself to a position of comfort, I guess, with that, in the sense that would I make the decision to take the plane out of the air before it hits the tower, right? I know I've got 60 innocent people up there. And I'm consciously knowing I'm going to allow them to go to save the 3,000, and me allowing for some of the exceptions and things in order to get to the bulk of it. I would cast that vote to save the majority. But it's a very tough subject to get. But they think they have us on that. They are hammering on that across the nation. That's the one thing they're hitting us on in Johnson County. They're trying to take our candidates down because they're pro-life.
Okay, slide back here. We got Peter.
Yep.
Question.
Ty, thanks for coming. Can you give us insight to the 26th Republican gubernatorial race, and will you be part of it?
They do. I appreciate that. 26 is going to be interesting. For the first time in my life, I'm not telling people no, because I want a conservative Republican governor. That's just what I want. I mean, it's and one that knows our system. And I don't see a lot of candidates in that field right now. And so, I mean, you get somebody coming back like Mike Pompeo or somebody. That's a no-brainer, right? Let's help him. Let's make it happen. He'd be easy. But if we have kind of the candidates that are stacking up now, I'm not real excited about them. And so we'll see. 2 years is a long time in politics. But if it looks like the thing to do and God's got the call, then you go. And if you don't, you don't. So.
Okay, right in front.
Yeah, everybody talks about property taxes. I pay them too, but I have a problem with that. If you've got property, you've got wealth, you need to protect it with fire engines, policemen, all that. And who else should pay more than the one who needs the protection? But the question is, if you did do away with it, what would they replace it with? Because you got to have money for government.
No, that's true. But that's why you want the broadest base and the lowest rates, right? We do have, and that's why you have local control. Truth is, if this group of people want to just tax themselves into oblivion for their golden fire hydrants or whatever, then they have the right to put people in office and do that. On the flip side of that, I'm going to vote for the guy that's going to lower them as much as he can, right? I mean, I want, our difficulty is property tax is the most hated tax, and we see why, but we hear about it in Topeka, but Topeka can't do a whole lot about it. Then we've done things like truth in taxation, trying to make everything transparent, trying to make everybody understand who you need to go talk to on that front. The sad part about our state level property tax is we'd have to buy our way out of it because that's all money that goes to K-12, right? I mean, and that's such kind of like the third rail of politics. The Kansas budget is just so heavily K-12 education and human services. So there's really not a lot outside of that. I mean, honestly, that's 85% of the budget are those two things alone. So.
Okay, Clyde, right back here.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for being here. One of the greatest threats to our liberties, in my personal opinion, is the administrative state. We have boards and bureaus that do quasi-legislative, that do their own rules, that are not necessarily in line with the state law. They do quasi-judicial hearings and whatnot. Is there going to be any attempt ever to rein some of this stuff in?
Another good question, and I think you'll be happy. The answer is yes. Literally had that conversation last week. You get in the habit of, and I was looking, I think over time it's because you'll get a friendly administration, right? And you'll go, so the easy thing to do is we're going to pass this concept and leave the agency to promulgate rules on it, which really, in net effect, have the effect of law. Well, then you get an administration that isn't so friendly, and they take that and run with it, right? And so we have these sections in our typical bills that tend to do that, right? It's kind of like boilerplate language, right? That says, you know, and the agency shall promulgate rules around this concept. Well, they don't necessarily have to, you know, and often then you have the opposite, like we have now with Laura. They're not reading that the same way of the legislative intent, right? And they're putting out rules. So we are. I just had that meeting with our chief reviser, which is the lead attorney for the legislature. What do I need to do? Do I need to take that language out and not allow for any? Do I need to be very specific? There's some constitutional language around the agencies being able to promulgate rules. So it sounds like the best vein is we need to be very specific, not say just you can promulgate rules. You know, we need to take out that generic kind of language and say that you'll promulgate rules as in A, B, C, and D, right? Around these very nice tight functions is the way to try to get back around that. And so we are going to implement a new way to address rules and regs. And that was one veto we did get overridden that gave us a little more power in removing regulations that the administration puts in place. But it's being challenged.
They act like judges too. That's
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been good. Well, just kind of like, you know, and we got the Chevron Act at the federal level that was, you know, helps us on that front too, trickle down to us. But that's why we need conservative Republicans in the administration, so you can start unilaterally backing some of that stuff up. And a legislature. I'm trying to leave a legislature in a position that they control the budget, that we have a different method of doing things in the way of regulations or promulgating rules. I'm trying to leave the place with a method of doing things that is a lot different than the way it's been, because you'll get that up there. There's so much churn, so much of what I run into, it's done because that's the way it's been done. Well, I want it to be done the way we want it to be done when I leave, so that's the way it's done for some period of time before somebody wakes up and figures it out and tries to go back the other direction. But yeah, we need to reduce regulation and reduce the power of the administrative state.
okay. Got a question from Myra?
I have two questions. The main question is, with the current environment, are abortion clinics held to like minimal health standards like any other medical clinic would be? And also, are they reporting the number or any information like that about the abortion that they perform? The other question is simply, one woman told me today that she was threatened with prosecution when she took her 3-year-old into the women's restroom.
I don't know about the second one. Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, Kansas does. We did pass the Women's Bill of Rights, and so for the purpose of law, you use biology to define male and female. So, yeah. For those that don't know, we all got white powder in the mail for that. All these kind of trans activists, they sent us all, you know, trying to pretend we're getting poisoned with anthrax. Cost us like $1 million trying to sort through all that mail and get it. I mean, they were up all night with lights and tests, but that was on the Women's Bill of Rights. And all of us that voted to override that veto got that little piece of mail. But no, your first, no, the clinic, yeah, we had current Kansas law holds them to the same high standard. Now, enforcement is up to the administration, right? It's up to, and so they're trying to challenge some of that. They're saying they're trying to challenge and say they have excessive requirements, and so it's all a challenge. That's and as far as reporting, that was one other thing important in the Born Alive Act. We had a section in there about mandatory reporting, so people know. I mean, they are by law required to report some things that they hadn't been required to report before. Because part of it is just knowing, right? The population can't respond to something they don't know about.
Okay, got a question for Jamie?
I've been out door knocking, and somebody came up to me and said that they were not going to vote for any Republican because of pro-choice. And so he had said that what happens if an 8-year-old comes in and needs an abortion? You know?
Somebody needs to go to jail.
Right. Or the credibility of creating that? That's my question.
So repeat that again. Sorry, my mind got lost at an 8-year-old pregnant.
8-year-old, you know,
Yeah.
who created that? And is there any kind of law there that's going to get that pedophile that created it?
We have current laws in place that that's all supposed to be reported. If you know of a crime, if you have a minor come in pregnant, they are supposed to report that to law enforcement. But again, I don't know that, I don't know. I mean, how do we, I don't know that that's being done, right? It needs to be, all that is to be reported. Those are crimes. Right? I mean, it's just nothing else but a crime, right? And the tragedy for those girls, I don't know how, 'cause especially with the human trafficking, everything is coming off the border now. What you're seeing with all the sex trafficking and the age of some of it's just, that feels, it's treasonous to me. I don't know, the law is there to say it must. I don't know what enforcement is doing.
All right, we have another question from Dr. Reedy.
So I hope I didn't disappoint you on that last one.
My question is about Medicaid payment, Medicaid. I'm a retired physician. I know that some doctors do not see Medicaid patients because the reimbursement is very, very low. So can you do something to increase the payment for the physicians for seeing Medicaid patients?
All right, another good question, and this, just like your Social Security one, done. We actually increased Medicaid expansion. Not Medicaid. Oh, that word's blah, blah, blah. We're going to back up to that in a second. The Medicaid reimbursement rates. Right? We've started to increase because of what we've learned. You listen to the arguments for Medicaid expansion that Laura Kelly makes. They're the same tired arguments that are empty today, more empty today than they were then. The truth is, with Medicaid expansion, we don't have to guess anymore, right? Some states have been extended for a decade, right? So you got all this data. And the latest data, there's a study came out of Florida, Paragon study. The most troubling thing for me is it is showing it is displacing currently eligible Medicaid, the frail and the elderly, the low-income mothers, the disabled. And it's just math, right? You have a fixed universe of physicians that will accept Medicaid, and now you're dumping tens of thousands of able-bodied individuals into that pool. It just by default, you're going to push out those that are already there. And that's being demonstrated, and it's not saving any rural hospitals. That just kills it. They go, we need to expand Medicaid, save rural hospitals. That's been proven. It's not saving rural hospitals. Matter of fact, that last study showed a slightly higher closure rate of rural hospitals in expanded states than non-expanded states. I mean, there's no direct correlation at all. And this whole BS about our federal tax dollars go and help other states, it's all just expanded debt. That's why we're in $35 trillion of debt. We're not losing federal tax dollars in that sense. I mean, all that's doing is paying for it. That debt is being loaded up, paying for expansion populations in the other states. And another thing is, it drops in every expanded state. Workforce participation drops significantly. We need people working, not incentivizing them not to work. And it's because by definition, expansion. Most people think, every time you run into somebody who's just off the street, they think expansion is expanding services to the disabled, to the populations there. It's expanding to able-bodied adults without dependents. That's what the bill says. That's it. You're expanding to an able-bodied population at the expense of the disabled population, and you're incentivizing them 90-10 versus 60-40. There's all kinds of reasons not to expand Medicaid. I mean, we're raising reimbursement rates. That's what we want to reimburse the rates better so it makes sense.
Okay, Ty, we got a question from Jim.
Mr. President, thank you for being here, and I'm a huge supporter of what you're trying to get done in the state, so we'll start with that.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, and I just want to make sure you're aware of this, and it's a request. We'll be working on this legislation in the spring. We have 16 state offices that we perform the functions for the state of Kansas here in Central County. I think every county is very similar. And a lot of those offices, we have to use local property taxes to fund those. One of those this year, the tag function, the tag offices, are getting close to $1 million short this year. We'll be over $1 million short, or about $1 million short next year. We're the last of 105 counties that's going to be using property taxes to that level to essentially fund a state office. And the fees that fund that office, it's a fee-funded office. Those fees haven't been raised in about 30 years. I have told my colleagues I would be glad to shut those offices down entirely over $1 million. I don't want to fund it through property taxes at all. I want to cut property taxes everywhere I can. To me, that's low hanging fruit. I say shut it down. But the state needs to step up and fund those offices. And I think that's just one example of the other 16 offices have similar problems. I'm asking the state to essentially step up and pay for those functions we're performing on behalf of the state of Kansas. This is a great example. $1 million next year will come out of property tax funds from Central County taxpayers to fund the state tag office. Thank you.
So Jim, are those they're all at this point, it's all based on the fee, so the fees are not keeping up, and there's no mechanism for the state to make up the difference?
We're maxed out. It's been that way for 30 years.
And so who also then controls, and then I need to learn like everybody else, the efficiency of the office? How efficient is the, I mean, is who's responsible for the efficiency of the office? So I mean, so that's because when I say it's like, okay, if somebody else, because what you typically run into, if somebody's doing a function, somebody else is paying a bill, I'm not always efficient with my function, right? I mean, because hey, somebody else, it's opium, right?
That's why they shut it down.
Yeah.
Someone's got to be responsible, not county taxpayers.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. County taxpayers should not be, through property tax in particular, be responsible for any state function, right? I mean, I agree with you on that. So we just got to, but there's got to be an answer to that. I don't know how that system generated originally. I don't know why it is the way it is, but so hey, I'm good. Solutions, right? That's what we need. We need solutions. The one thing you don't want a local property taxpayer subsidizing a state function.
Okay, back to your time, Virginia.
I have a question about incentives that are given to businesses to come into the state of Kansas. We talked about getting people to work and taxes. What happens when one of those businesses overinflates how many employees they're going to have that we've given incentives to, and at the end, we haven't heard anything or anything coming from them that they did hire as many as they were going to?
Yeah, again, I'm not a huge fan of some of those, but the way the function works now, there's clawbacks on any of the incentives. That's like you saw that with, leaning on this. You saw that with, it was Cerner. When Cerner got, because you had those big buildings up in Johnson County, thousands of employees. When they sold to Oracle didn't fulfill. Right, they emptied those buildings out. So there's hundreds of thousands of dollars being reclaimed through that for not following through. So you generally want those. Same is true. I try to push back. If you're going to give any incentive, make sure it's performance. Right, you have to have performed the thing before you get any claim of the incentive. Right, it has to be done, not projected forward, but on the backside of it. Right, it's kind of like a reimbursement, not a forward-thinking option. So, because it is the lay of the land, as frustrating it is, and it is part of what frustrates me in just government. Right, it's become the method of operation across the country, and so the first guy to disarm loses. And so you participate in that, but you certainly want to do to the minimum amount possible and make sure the taxpayers aren't on hook for anything.
Okay, over here, we got a question from Donna.
So based on you saying that it looks like the Senate is going to have some good-minded folks there, are they going to be able to stop any type of marijuana, medical or otherwise, from being from going free?
So right at this point, I think the answer is yes. I mean, that is something that is it was kind of like they reminded me of the battles for like gaming and stuff. That was just an onslaught over and over and over and over and over until something broke. That's what we're seeing up there on medical marijuana. Actually, what's been helpful in setting some of that back is with the disaster that became Oklahoma. Right there, they passed it by proposition. I thank the Lord we don't have an open proposition, right? You have all kinds of stuff that's not ready to come in that'll come in, and they're so overgrown. I had a conversation with their head, kind of their version of DEA. He said they're 98% overgrown. And I go, what do you mean by that? He goes, 1.8% of their known production would fill every medical card to its maximum. So they're not even trying to sell it in Oklahoma, right? The market saturated. So we're seeing the ill effects of that in Kansas, right? I mean, that's a lot of the illicit stuff from Colorado's moved to Oklahoma. So that's helped in the sense of us not having them win it, because there's a huge lobby for it. And what I keep telling them is like, it's the problem with that conversation is it's so fraudulent, right? I mean, to say that they coined it medical marijuana. Well, you don't smoke medicine in any other way, right? I mean, is it really, where I think people are open, this is where I think people are open to that conversation is when you come to things like palliative care, end of life, or somebody that's heavily addicted to opioids and needing, or your distressed veterans. Is there a vein of something that actually makes sense? But then the question becomes legitimacy, right? What's a legitimate way to show that it is medicine and delivered through legitimate means, like a pharmacy, to a legitimate ailment? Right, that's what I think's been missing in this whole thing. It's like everywhere I've seen, it's been medical marijuana, but it just becomes recreation light, right? It becomes a means to access without. But it's where I have some personal sympathy is my son-in-law's mother passed away from cancer a few years ago, and she seemed to be in her last days finding some relief with some version of the cannabis. I mean, it wasn't smoking things, but I thought, well, am I missing something? I mean, is there some vein for palliative care and end of life, or just in the vein of being able to use experimental medications in those veins? Is there a vein? I think there's a conversation to be had, but you're not going to get in Kansas, at least not while I'm around, a full blown, somebody's growing it and you're going to go to your dope shop next door and pick out your little thing. I worry mostly about, we already have 1,100 CBD stores, which I've had a few from my friends say that there's stuff going. I mean, they're selling some things in there that are probably not exactly legal, and so we need to get back, just like regulating and enforcement, right? You need to have. We test our liquor stores, right? Are you selling to minors? We're not doing anything to regulate those stores, and so we need to probably take a look at what does that look like. Because we're seeing the ill effects. If you don't think we have the ill effects of marijuana, I mean, walk outside, right? I mean, we are seeing all that just on the illegal side. And I'm not saying you need to legalize it to make it work, because you see that everywhere. That's not the answer. But there might be, if in the form of legitimate, I know that's a long answer, but in the form of legitimate medicine, I think there's a conversation. Outside of that, you're not going to see it.
Okay.
You mentioned some problems with the Kansas Supreme Court. When will we get an amendment that changes how they are put into office?
Well, Senate's passed it a couple times in the past, and it depends who's there, right? This is why these elections matter. Also, really even beyond that, the money that's going to come in for those amendments. The last time we took a real shot at it, we couldn't get it, right? I mean, now honestly, down here, 4th District, we didn't retain. We had that big push to non-retain. I can't remember what year that was, but 2016. The 4th District did not retain. But you have the Johnson County crowd, they turned it and made it all about education. But we do, until we solve that problem, we're going to continue down this path of what we have, right? We have a Supreme Court that, even just, especially under Lawton Duss, that man's probably the most activist judge I've ever been aware of, right? You had state-owned casinos, you had constitutional abortion, you had, he just stack them up. That was, we're going to have that problem, because for those that don't know, that nominating committee, that's the problem. In our Constitution, a 9-member nominating committee, 5 of which are from the bar. It doesn't matter if you got an R or a D in the office, you're going to get whoever they want you to have. And so you never get a true strict instructions. I would put forward, that's how nimble they are. The one person they let through was Caleb Stiegel, which is the only conservative on the court. They let him come through and then immediately go, see, conservatives can make it through, and then everybody after that. So you got one, you know, they don't mind a 6-on-1, right? But anyway, until we change that, we're not going to get, I think if we have the right numbers up there, I'm going to try to get it to you here in the next year. So, probably try to put it on 26, right? Because you need a lot of people to show up. Probably try to get it in the general election of 26 or something. But.
Thank you, President, for being here. I wanted to ask about medical maldistribution and kind of picking in on the question for service. In 1969, the Kansas Regional Medical Program did a study on medical maldistribution. For us, it was the creation, for me, to write a law for advanced nurse practitioners. We are working hard to get them to the rural area, but in western Kansas, we're short tons of OBGYNs, and we do not have a lot of nurses in the nurse midwifery situation that can use the APRN law. I'm curious if we could ever look at a state board like the National Service Board.
So it's not been discussed. We are doing a lot of scope of practice things, right? Allowing for changes in scope of practice to allow for lower level practitioners to do some things. It's all important to make sure it's all done safely. So there is a desire. We've done that on multiple fronts, whether it's been nursing or optometry or dental. I think the optometrists are back again for some more. But no, I'm with you. The problem you have in our rural areas, it's just the numbers, right? That individual, it's hard to make a living because you don't have enough patients to supply that living. And so that's the difficulty. We really have to look at a paradigm shift in how we deliver health care rurally, because the current model doesn't work. You'll get a county hospital, right? But if you only got one patient there, I mean, you're just loading it up on your taxpayers, and docs can't make any money and nurses can't make any money. So it's a very difficult, complex subject. But the short answer to my long-winded answer is yeah, we are looking at scope of practice and those types of things.
Okay, from Denise back here, we have a question.
Thank you for being here. So a friend of mine's friend's son went to register to vote at the Department of Motor Vehicles. And after that, they were given a form. And on the form, it says, you will be deemed fully registered and eligible to vote for all offices, federal, state, and local, whether or not you have provided documentation stating that stating your citizenship. So what are your thoughts on that?
That doesn't appear to be legal to me. Kansas has a citizenship requirement. That was a document that came out of a Kansas motor vehicle?
Yes, because I actually went and picked one up on my own.
I would love, can you text me or send me or give me a copy of that? That doesn't comport with what I understand to be current Kansas law, but I will make sure, because it should be. I mean, that doesn't sound right, and that would be obviously Secretary of State's can have that, which has been an issue. But I would like to have that, because that's something we could handle.
I'll make sure you get a copy.
Thank you.
Okay, Carl's got a question.
Actually, a bit of a question seeking your opinion. First off, the Democrat majority in 1992, they had a majority in the legislature in the House at that time, and the Democrat governor created the statewide property tax. That rapidly became 36.5 mils. In the late 90s, it was reduced to its current level by Republican governor and majority.
Yep.
How much does 1 mil generate right now? And second point I'd like to get into, and you could probably maybe do a whole program on this, but Derek Schmidt lost Johnson County by over 50,000 votes. What do we do about Johnson County?
Well, so I have a working theory about us all grouping up into these blue dots and losing our minds. But it's Johnson County. What I think one of Derek's shortcomings in that, because was he didn't go up there and fight for it. right? There's sometimes you need to go into the lion's den and just be there to not lose as bad, right? So if he'd only lost that by 40,000, he'd be governor, right? I mean, you got to be able to take it on. I mean, it's not fun, but you can't. And I get the strategy of get out in our red areas and run your numbers up what you can, but you've got to be able to also go in the lion's den, and because we live in echo chambers. I just sit there and I've been doing this now for the last couple of years. Here's where I first noticed it. It was where it really jumped out at me that it's all part of the machine, right? The story on the news, it was Laura versus Derek. And the lead-in was, and the story was just 2 days before election, she's doing this, he's doing that. But the language they use is she, tied to these good things, is doing this. He, tied to these bad things, is doing that, right? I mean, and so you go watch. So we had the last couple debates, right? The presidential and vice presidential. I immediately go over to MSNBC, right? They're not even covering the same stories. They're not, I mean, so the people who watch that, and that's Johnson County, that's what I'm circling back to, they don't hear the messages we need to give them. And if you're not up there giving it, that's all they've got. That's what's given me some grace for people that don't like me. I get it, right? I mean, it's like if I believed everything I read about me, I wouldn't like me either. So it is what you got to go take the fight to them, and I think that was missed out in that cycle. To your statewide mill, I think it's bumped up now to almost 50 million per mill at the full state level. I think it's in that ballpark. And yeah, we have been peeling it back. And so to your point, see, knowing what that is, right? It guarantees this money to K-12, right? That mill. So for every mill you take off that 20, you got to go deliver it through sales or income tax. It's not we just collecting less tax. You got to go get it another way, because through the K-12 formula, it's guaranteed to K-12. And so that's what I mean when the complexity for the state is to reduce any property tax, you have to buy your way out of it or change the school formula, which is extremely difficult to do. So, but that does expire in 2026. That's going to be an interesting conversation in the next couple of years.
All right. Let's give 5 minutes.
Thank you all. Yeah, thank you all.